Well, good morning. You get me virtually today. I'm out, probably not having slept much the last number of nights with kids. We're going to be on our way back today. We should get back sometime in the afternoon, but I'm sure we're going to have a great time, or I'm sure we've had a great time. I'm obviously taping this before we've had such a great time. So this morning, obviously, we're doing something a little different. I wanted to talk a little bit about archaeology and the Bible. So we're taking a bit of a break from our study in John. Whenever I hear of something that happens in terms of archaeology that boosts our understanding and boosts our confidence in the Bible, I love to bring those things to you so that you can be encouraged as well to see how reliable the Bible is. And so I thought I would start out today. Here I am in our backyard. It is the Erickson homestead, and as I look around here, this whole area would have been full of trees at one point in time. There's the old barn. So that I think that I'm guessing that was probably the second building that was made. The house is behind these trees over here, and that was probably the third building that was made. But we have this building here, and I'll walk a little bit away so you can see it. And it is a small building. It has a chimney built into it. And it's an amazing little building. So they would have, my guess is that this was probably the first building that they built on the property here. And I love looking at the corners of these old buildings, seeing how they cut these sides. And interesting here, because on this one here, they obviously made a bit of a mistake because they had to put in an extra piece. And so even on an old building like this, that's only, what, 100, at the most 120 years old, there are things that we can learn about, and now here, this has really no bearing on life, but the Bible, there are still scholars who would say that the Bible was not a historical book. I'm just going to set this into the ground here. Well, let's see what works here. There are still those who say that the Bible was not meant to be a historical book. It's just a story of myths and legends for us to try and, sorry about this, to try and use to push people to believe what we say about the Bible. And so I love it when things happen in the Bible. And in the last number of years, there have been two stories that have come out that have really shown us some details of how accurate the Bible is. And so I just want to know, now, the discoveries weren't made like this year. The way science works, the way archaeology works is they'll find a discovery, they have to research it, they have to come up with their conclusions, the ones who found it, and they really keep it hidden from everyone else. And once they've figured out what they think that, the story is behind it, then they'll publish it. And then that's what peer review is. Peer review comes in and looks at those discoveries. Well, there are two very significant finds that have happened in just the last little while. And again, not that they've happened, but that they've been published and that they've been released. Just recently, I was on YouTube looking through, and there was one, I thought it was clickbait. I wasn't even going to click on it because it was about the fact that Sodom had been found. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah, it's one of those ones that the Bible, it's early enough in the Bible's history that those scholars who think that the Bible isn't accurate, that it's just a bunch of myths, they wouldn't even think that Sodom could be an actual event. But for those of us who hold the Bible as a true and accurate source of history, we would look at that and go, no, there's much, and I've said this before, there's much that hasn't been proven yet, but there's nothing in the Bible that's ever been disproven by archaeology. And so even this idea of Sodom and Gomorrah, could it be found? It's one of the Holy Grails. I mean, the Holy Grail is another thing that, the cup that Jesus drank from, that they would try to find. And even if they found one, how would you prove that was it? We don't know. The cross, well, there are so many pieces of the cross, you could probably build a whole ark out of pieces of the cross. There are these things that are desired to be found. The Ark of the Covenant. we're not 100% sure where that is. I believe that it still exists somewhere, and when I believe that they're going to build the temple yet in the future, and it's going to be brought to light where that is. Or another one that is far enough in the past that the skeptics would say, well, no, it didn't really exist. And yet there are those who, so Noah's Ark. There is one, now I should caution you against this one name. If you ever see the name Ron Wyatt, that's clickbait. He has found Noah's Ark. He has found the place where they crossed the Red Sea. He's found the rock that Moses split and brought water out of. He's found the Ark of the Covenant, and it was under Golgotha. So when Jesus died on the cross, his blood actually went down and it landed on the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant. And no one else has seen these things. There's nothing to verify it, but he has his followers who believe very firmly, and that's just clickbait. But this one here, I was not going to click on it, and then I saw the name under it, and it was Joel Rosenberg, who's a name that I respect. He has actually been active in politics. He was, when Netanyahu was in his first term, when he would come to the United States, Joel Rosenberg was the one who would show him around and would be his liaison between Netanyahu and the Americans. And so he had a fairly high position. He's a Christian. He's Jewish, so he's a Messianic Christian, so when I saw his name, okay, I clicked on it. And it was about, did they find Sodom? Well, what happened was, there was this is back almost 20 years ago, there was a scientist who was interested in finding and seeing, and Sodom and Gomorrah was one of those ones that's far enough in the past that, like I say, how would you even prove it? The common thought was that Sodom and Gomorrah were at the very south end of the Dead Sea, and that the Dead Sea, it's probably at the bottom of the Dead Sea. There's no way that you're going to find it, and so most scholars weren't even looking. And so he looked at the maps of that area he's in Israel studying, and he's actually a professor of a university in New Mexico. But he's over there, he looks at all of the Western material that's out there, and it just doesn't make sense. There's no big cities that would match the description of what's in the Bible for Sodom and Gomorrah. And so he went over he first of all, he went and he did what you're supposed to do. He took his Bible and he said, okay, so what does the Bible say about where Sodom and Gomorrah would be? And in Genesis chapter 13, Abraham and Lot are in the land of Canaan, and they are at fairly close to where Jericho is. So it's at the north end of the Dead Sea, close up against the escarpment. The Dead Sea is 1,000 feet or more than 1,000 feet lower than sea level. And Abraham and Lot are looking at this land, and their flocks are growing too big. They can't stay together. They have to divide. And so Abraham says, if you go left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left. And so Lot looks and it says, Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt towards Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out towards the east. So from where they are just north of Jericho, looking to east, instead of looking to you wouldn't be able to see the south end of the Dead Sea. So it doesn't make sense that Sodom would be all that way down there. And so he took this verse here and he wanted to look on the east side of the Jordan, north of the Dead Sea, and he looked at all of the Western books and maps, and there was very little there. And so he went to Amman, Jordan, looked at their maps, and it turns out not only is there a whole bunch of stuff there, but some of them actually have legendary link to Sodom and Gomorrah. So he looked at it, studied it, and he went to a place that's called Tel Al-Hammam, and he got permission to dig in this area. And so he began digging, and what they do, because here we build out of wood, and so thousands of years from now, there's going to be absolutely nothing here. But they build out of stone, and so the stone's there, so then it gets destroyed, and it's all rubble, and then there's another city that's built on that, and because it's even just a little bit higher than the first one, it's better to see the area around, and it gets destroyed. And so there's these mounds with levels of cities. And they can determine by what they find there, both in the types of pottery and if there's any writing, they can determine the age of where they're at. And so teams of archaeologists will take, one will be a meter square, and they'll dig down until they find a habitation layer, and they'll document that. And then if there's sufficient evidence, they'll go lower than that, and they'll keep on going down. And not just that it's 1 meter, but they do it in 1 meter increments. Well, they had dug down to a level that was should have been about the time of Abraham. So they're in the right area. So that means that there was a civilization here. And it turns out it's a very large palace. It's a big civilization, and they're down there now. Remember, they're from a university in New Mexico. That will play in because they're digging, and one of the archaeologists finds this odd-looking rock. And one of the other scholars is up on the top, and they throw this rock up to the scholar, and the person up top from New Mexico looks at it and says, Trinitite. Now, what's Trinitite? Trinitite is, it's named after the test site for the atomic bombs, Trinity, the Trinity site. And when the atomic bomb went off, the ground was covered with this glass-like, not clear glass, but a really murky, mixed up glass, though, quality. And it's all around, and it's called Trinitite. And here at Sodom and Gomorrah, they find this piece of rock that they identify, that the scholar looks at it, and his first thought is Trinitite. Well, they send some of this back to the university in New Mexico, where they study Trinitite, where the geologists are studying Trinitite, the ones who they had no idea where this piece came from, and they look at this and said, so where did this Trinitite come from? It came from the Middle East. And so they started looking into it. So how could this be? What kind of an explosion would happen, because it took an atomic bomb to create it at the Trinity site? What kind of explosion would destroy so much as to make this in the Middle East? And so if it was a meteor or a meteorite, there's a technical name, and I can't remember what it is, but for ones that hit the ground, if it hits the ground, there should be a crater there. Well, there's no crater here. And yet, in this site, not only is this Trinitite, but it is that there's evidence of a direction of the blast going in a certain direction. There's evidence that if the explosion happened on this side of it was Trinitite, but this side was still maybe pottery or whatever it was originally. And so there's some sort of an explosion. What could answer this? Well, I don't know if you have heard of, in Russia, there was a site, there was an event back in 2013 in Chelyabinsk, Russia, where 22 kilometers up, it was quite high, 20 or 30 even, 22 is the number that's in my head, but don't quote me on that. A meteor came in, quite high, and it exploded in the air. And it exploded with such force that it knocked the roof of one factory right off. There were over 1,000 injuries, and it was almost all because people saw the flash. They went to the windows to look at the flash, and the blast wave broke the window, and the shattered glass came in and lacerated. All kinds of people were damaged and hurt because of that. And so here's this it's called an air blast, and it doesn't make it all the way down, and it was powerful enough to cause structural damage and a lot of injury on the ground 20 to 30 kilometers away. There's another site in Russia called, I'm going to have to check my notes here a second. Where is it? Come on. Oh, Tunguska, that's it. Tunguska in Russia. Very sparsely populated area. They heard the blast. I think some might have seen some sort of a flash. They went to examine it, and here in the center are the trees still standing up, nothing on it, just the trunk of the tree standing there. Then outside of that, 800 square, I can't remember if it's kilometers or miles, but this huge area where the trees are just laid flat in a circle around this blast site. And again, they've determined that it was a meteoric airburst, where the meteorite didn't actually hit the ground, but just prior to hitting the ground, it blew up and caused all this damage. And they're quite certain now in looking at the research, and this is what's out for peer review now. They have studied, they've published their findings, and now the other scholars have the chance. There was a pigeon just flying over me. The other scholars have the chance now to weigh in. And obviously there's always some detractors, but there's good evidence that there was a meteoric airburst over top of Tel Al-Hammam, which at that point in time was probably Sodom, and it blew up to such an extent that it burning, I mean, it matches the description in Genesis chapter, is it 18? 19, chapter 19. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur and the, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, including those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. There was this blast that killed everything, that took it out. I love it when something is found archaeologically that says, see, the Bible is true. Now, I want to talk about the implications of that event in just a moment, because it's not just the fact that the Bible is true, but I believe that there might be a reason why God has allowed us to see those things now. But there's one other event or one other archaeological finding that I wanted to just mention first, and that is in Israel. There are two mountains. There's one mountain that's called Ebal and one that's called Gerizim. And Moses had instructed Joshua when they went into the land, take 6 of the tribes and have them stand on Mount Gerizim, take 6 of the tribes, have them stand on Mount Ebal, and the ones on Mount Gerizim, they're going to say, if you follow the commands of the Lord, you're going to be blessed, and here's all the ways you're going to be blessed. And then over on Mount Ebal, those 6 tribes would say, if you don't follow God, you're going to be cursed, and here's the ways that you're going to be cursed. And so Mount Ebal is the mount of cursing. So there was an archaeological dig site back in the 1950s where they had excavated, and when they excavate, they dig down, they have all this rubble, and they put the rubble in a specific place so that they know where that rubble came from. Well, this team got permission, it was an American team of archaeologists, got permission not to dig, but to go through the rubble on the site, and they knew about where it was from and stuff. And so when they did the original dig, they did what's called dry sifting. And dry sifting, you have a plate of screen, you pour the dirt on it, you shake it, and all the fine stuff comes out, and you sort of sift through and see if there's any pieces of pottery or anything that's useful. And that's what they had done to this originally. Well, now they wanted to go back and they wanted to do wet sifting. So once you've sifted it and taken that off, you take and you spray it down. And now you can see. And so they found in this sifting process something that would have very easily been overlooked earlier. It was just a small piece of lead. It was actually lead sheet that had been folded up. And they took, and with all of their technology, they deciphered that there was writing that was written on this tablet. And then it was folded up. And they found other things like this before. They're called curse tablets. And so here, though, this is different because not just because it's a curse tablet, but because of where they found it. They found it on the mountain of cursing, but there's something else that they found as well. They found out that it was written in a certain script. So first of all, they found it, they did the research on it, and they read, and it says, cursed, 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 cursed by the God Yahweh, you will die cursed, cursed you will surely die, cursed by Yahweh, cursed, cursed, cursed. So there's obviously it's significant about where it's found, on Mount Ebal, where they were supposed to declare the cursings. But more than that, the type of script was called a Paleo Hebraic script. It was the very earliest form. Now, why this is significant is because the detractors, the people who say that the Bible's just a myth and it's a good story and it's not history, they say, well, Moses couldn't have written the first 5 books of the Bible because writing hadn't been invented yet. Well, the more they study, the more they find out that, yes, writing had been invented. In fact, here, in a script that would have been used at the time of Moses, is this. Now, we're not saying that it was Joshua and the Israelites right at that time that put this down, but it was very shortly after that, be judging by the way that script was there. So it's very significant that they found this curse tablet on Mount Ebal. See, the secular archaeologists do everything that they can to remove the Jews from the land of Israel. They say they don't deserve to be there. They're the conquerors. They're the oppressors. And the Israelites say, no, we have history here that goes back ages. And now something like this comes along and proves that, yes, they do have history. So the script that's used, but there's one more thing. This is the earliest use of the term Yahweh. That's in Old King James, the word Jehovah is now, we're pretty sure that it was pronounced Yahweh. And this is the earliest form, it's the earliest usage of this name for God that they've ever found written before. And so again, here in the right place, at the right time, is something that, again, bolsters our belief that the Bible is historical. The Bible can be counted on as being historical truth. It's true. So now I want to just take a few minutes and go, because I think that with both of these finds, the one Sodom and Gomorrah and the one at the cursed tablet at Mount Ebal, I think there's a reason why God may have allowed these things to be discovered at this point in time. And it has to do with the state of our world. You see, while our God is a patient God, there have been times in the past, and these two examples, or these two archaeological finds, show us that there have been times in the past when God's patience ran out. So obviously in Sodom and Gomorrah, his patience ran out, and he said, no, their evil has reached such an extent, I need to get rid of them. And with this cursed tablet, we know that the Israelites kept getting worse and worse and more disobedient to the point that God sent them off into exile. God's patience ran out. And we're living in a time right now where I have to ask the question, how patient is God going to be? How patient is God going to be? See, Sodom was known for a particular sin. It's a sin that, sodomized, and homosexuality. So it wasn't just that they practiced homosexuality. When you look at that story of Lot and the angels, these angelic men who came and were under his roof, and what did the men of the city do? They came and they demanded that Lot give them access to these two men so they could have sex with them. Unwilling participants. They demanded that they have the right to practice this upon those who didn't want to practice this. It wasn't just that they practiced homosexuality or that they supported those who did. When you read Romans chapter 1 talks about how God gave them over. And there's this spiral that goes downward and downward from sin. And God continues to give them over, then he gives them over. And homosexuality is a part of that. Their women abandon that which is natural for that which is unnatural. In the same way, the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. Therefore, God gave them over to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all, and then he goes on, gives this long list, being filled with all wickedness, greed, evil, a whole long list. And then at the end it says that, and although they know the ordinance of God, that those who do such things are worthy of death, because death is always the consequence of sin, those who do such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but they give hearty approval to those who practice them. They demand their right to practice this on others and to make this normative. And what do we see in our society right now? I constantly ask myself, why would people think, with the drag queens reading to our kids in libraries, kindergarten kids, why would a drag kid want to read a story to a child, if not to try and get that child to think that this was a normal way of behavior? And that it's trying to get that child to say, hey, you could choose this too. So if we're not at the same spot that Sodom and Gomorrah were, we are not very far away from that. And the Bible's very clear that God is a God who has patience. We know he has patience. 1 Peter, God is not slow in keeping his promises, some count slowness, but he is patient, not wanting anyone to perish. He's a compassionate God. He doesn't want anyone to perish, and so he's holding off as long as he can to try and wait for more to come to him. Now, we need to remember that there are two sort of categories of individuals involved in this sin. There are those who have heard the lie and who have believed the lie and are being misled by the lie, and then there are those who are pushing it as an agenda, demanding it. And I think God looks on those two very differently. When we're dealing with people, the majority of people, if we meet someone who's involved in that lifestyle, they're involved in that lifestyle because they were looking for something. They've swallowed the lie. They've believed a lie, and really, as Christians, we think that through and go, okay, what's the lie? Well, number one, the lie is that God makes mistakes. Satan would have our young people believe that God makes mistakes. He didn't mean to make you as a boy. He meant to make you as a girl. And so you can make the changes now, and you can take and be in the place of God and change yourself into that. That's a lie. God doesn't make mistakes. God knew exactly how he made each one of us. We are knit together in our mother's wombs. He has a purpose for us. We have dignity and value. And the reason that people choose that is because they're empty and they're looking for something to fill that. And so we need to have compassion on those who are in that state. But we also need to understand that just as God's patience ran out back then, God's patience one day is going to run out now. We know that in the Old Testament, it says that they weren't allowed, the Israelites weren't allowed to go in and destroy Canaan because the sin of the Canaanites had not been complete yet. When they went in to the Canaanites, when they went in and destroyed those nations, what were those nations doing? It was Sodom and Gomorrah type of nations, those activities, but it was also, they were burning their fire, they're sacrificing their children in the fire to Molech and to their gods. Well, are we not doing the same thing? We don't have a God that's a statue, but we have a God of convenience. Well, this child is going to get in my way, so we're killing our kids. We're killing this next generation, and then we're encouraging, the generation of our young people is being encouraged to accept a lifestyle that doesn't produce any more kids. And we know that Satan hates life. He hates anything that God has created. And so he does everything that he can to grab it and to bend it and to break it. Satan is alive and well and active, but God is bigger. God is bigger. For us, we need to understand that God is patient. His patience will run out, but he's a holy God. And he has a perfect plan for each one of us. And we need to come to him and understand that that plan is truly what's best. We need to offer ourselves to him and say, I want your will more than anything else. I don't want to fill those voids with anything other than Jesus. And we've talked about that many times. I bring that out often because I see that danger in our world, even among us as Christians. We choose to go to those things that don't satisfy in order to have our thirst quenched instead of going to God. Our God is an amazing God. He has given us his word. His word is true. He's revealed who he is. He's revealed that he's a holy God, and he wants what's best for us. He didn't put all these rules in here to stop us from having fun. He put these rules in here in order that we would know the best way possible to live. We need to choose for ourselves to say, I want to be like Jesus. I want to be holy. I want to follow God. But then we need to have compassion on the people who are around us. We need to pray for them. We need to reach out to them. We need to encourage them with the understanding that God is the only one who can meet those longings in your heart. You can try all these other ways that you want. It's not going to work. It's only when we follow Jesus It's only when we enter into that relationship with him and we say, Jesus, I believe that you are the Creator God. You've created me on purpose, for a purpose, and I want to give myself to you. I want to follow you. I want that thirst quenched by you and you alone. I want your will to be done in my life. And when we do that, we know that we avoid any repercussions of God's lack of patience because we are in his family and he loves us. And we have the promise and the hope, not of death, of eternal death in hell, but we have the promise of eternal life with Jesus in heaven. And it will be absolutely incredible. And so, Heavenly Father, we come now and we thank you for giving us evidence in our world here to show us that the message that you've given us is true. It's based on historical fact. We thank you for that. And I pray that we will watch for Satan's lies. I pray that we'll say no to those lies. I pray for protection for our young ones, for our children. Give us wisdom to know how to give them the truth and found them on the truth and give them hope and perspective. And then, Father, for our world, we pray that there would be those who would make that decision yet to follow you. And we know that you are patient for that. And yet we also know that we get to spend eternity with you in heaven because we have placed our faith and our trust and our hope in you and in you alone. So fill us with your Spirit. Help us to be obedient to you. Help us to encourage those who are around us. Help us to have compassion on those. Help us to be sources of truth and sources of light. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.